By itself, John 10, 1 through 10, the passage we just read, comes across as confusing. When I first read it, it was verse 6 that resonated the most. Jesus used this figure of speech with them, but they did not understand what he was saying to them. We'll talk about it. Whether Jesus is the gate, the shepherd, or both. But the first step to making sense of it is to look at John 9. That sets the stage for this teaching, provides the context for it. We talked a little bit about John chapter 9 when the kids did the art project with the clay. Anyway, here's what happens in John 9. Jesus and his disciples are walking along and they see a blind man. Maybe some of this is ringing a bell. They see a blind man, and the disciples right away, the first thing they say when they see him is to Jesus, "Did this blind man sin, or was it his parents who sinned that made him blind?" Who sinned to make this happen? They didn't say, "Did somebody sin?" They assume that there is someone to blame for this. This is revealing a cultural assumption that this man deserves the condition that he has. The default position is to cast the man aside, blame him for his blindness. There is a widespread inclination toward division, separating themselves from the lowly blind man. Anyway, Jesus rejects the premise of their question. He often does this, and he says, no one sinned for this. In fact, God can use his blindness to glorify God. You're not thinking about it the right way. Well, anyway, they start to interact with the man, and Jesus heals him. Do you remember? Jesus spits in the mud and spits in the dirt and makes mud, rubs it on the guy's face, and says, go to the pool of Siloam and wash it off, and then you'll be able to see. Sure enough, that's what he does. And it works. He can see. And he's excited about it. Wouldn't you be? He's talking about it, and he's not keeping it quiet. Sometimes Jesus tells them to keep it quiet. Not this time. This time he's talking about it, and people notice. It does not take long for the Pharisees to take notice of what's happened. I just want you to think about that for a minute. If one of us, if one among you had miraculous healing, how would you react? You'd be excited. You'd celebrate. You'd be glad for them. You'd say, oh my Lord, how does it feel? There would be a sense of relief, of joy. But that's not how the Pharisees react. Instead, it almost reads as if they panic. My Bible, the way that they had the subheading for this section was, the Pharisees investigate, like they're CSI detectives or something. The Pharisees investigate. And it literally reads like an interview. They're interviewing him. Okay, tell us exactly what happened, step by step. And so they're like interrogating this blind man about how this happened. And then the Pharisees kind of move aside and they discuss it. And the scripture says they're quite divided about it. One reason they're divided is because Jesus healed them on a day, turns out to be the Sabbath. And so some of the Pharisees say, well, Jesus healed the man. That must mean that he is from God. And some of the other Pharisees say, well, if he's really of God, then he wouldn't have been working on the Sabbath. You see how all their focus is on whether or not Jesus is a good guy or a bad guy, not about the miracle of the healing. They're not sure what to make of it. They're not sure what to do about it. You know what they do next? They continue the investigation, and they go to the guy's parents. Can you believe that? They go to the man's parents, and they say, first of all, was he actually born blind? Maybe it's all a trick. And the parents are like, they can sense that there's anxiety around this. They can sense that something weird's going on, and they play it cool. The parents say to the Pharisees who are interviewing them, I'm telling you, he was born blind. I'm telling you that now he can see, and we're not saying anything else. Do you sense how it's gotten weird? How there's like this other outside factor that is coloring their interactions. The parents can sense the suspicion. So we talked about how there is this kind of inclination toward division culturally revealed by the disciples' initial question. Then we see that play out when the Pharisees get word that Jesus might have done this. And if he did it, what does that mean for them? And then the parents of the blind man can sense it. It's spreading, that anxiety, that suspicion, that resulting division. It's just like it's permeating in all of these interactions. Well, the Pharisees haven't gotten anywhere. Maybe it's not exactly clear what they're trying to accomplish, but it didn't work to directly interview the man, didn't work to directly interview the parents, so they literally go back to the blind man, and they try to do it again. And the blind man says the same thing he said the first time. I was blind. He told him about the mud. He healed him. But this time, the formerly blind man gets a little snarky. He can sense what's going on. And here's what he said. After the Pharisees get a little bit defensive, the blind man says to them, do you want to be his disciples too? Maybe a way to translate. You guys seem so interested in him, so intrigued. Why don't you follow him too? You can sense maybe how subversive this is. The lowly blind man undermining the temple leaders, almost condescending to them. Well, the Pharisees aren't having it. And one of them, appalled by the lonely blind man's out-of-line remarks, says this, why should we listen to you? You're the one who sinned to get blind in the first place. They revert to the easy jab, right? Well, Jesus is aware of all of this, and he goes to the blind man and he comforts them. Jesus says, I came into this world for judgment so that those who do not see may see, and those who do see may become blind. He's speaking loud enough for them to hear. He knows it. One eavesdropping Pharisee who's clearly moved by these actions of Jesus, whether he'll say it or not. He's in some way moved or convinced of Jesus' legitimacy because he says this to Jesus, surely we're not the blind ones, are we? If you were, you'd have no sin. But since you say we see, Jesus says, your sin remains. This is the bizarre sequence of events that leads up to Jesus' teaching about the sheepfold and the shepherd and the gate. In this culture, of course, the temple is much more than a place of worship. The Hebrew religion is less like one religion among many and more like the national religion. This blind man, I'm trying to convince you, is just as much a part of the flock as anyone else. If the Pharisees don't know him personally, it seems like they know at least who he is. They know of him. And when one of the flock gets healed, that's a reason to celebrate. It's an incredible relief, it's a joy, but why is it that the Pharisees don't seem capable of rejoicing? It really, they don't seem very interested in the blind man at all. It all becomes clear when we realize that their only concern is how this healing affects them. That's maybe the key difference between the Pharisees' leadership and Jesus' leadership. Because the way that they treated that blind man, it's just no way that a shepherd would treat his sheep. So Jesus evokes this image of the sheepfold, where the sheep recognize the shepherd's voice. It's inherently relational. Can you feel how the love of the shepherd to his sheep and the familiarity of the sheep hearing the shepherd's voice, the obvious love that they have for the shepherd, how that contrasts what we observed from the Pharisees in the previous chapter? Jesus saw a blind man, and he was surrounded by a group of people who were suspicious of the blind man, and it would have been quite easy for Jesus to go along with that, or to walk right by him, like in the parable of the Good Samaritan, right? To ignore him, to cast him aside, to say, "What sin did you commit to get you like this?" But that's not what he does. He was almost invited to do that by the disciples. But Jesus treats the blind man with dignity. He talks with him. He shows him mercy. He heals him. The shepherd does what's best for the sheep, even if he has to sacrifice a bit of himself. He knows their name, and the gate to be a part of the sheepfold is wide open for everyone to come through. For whatever reason, so many seek to reach the sheepfold by another way. They go under the gate. They jump over the fence. Maybe it's not that tall. Maybe it's got holes in it where they can shout through. It's actually fairly easy to reach the sheep another way besides the gate, if you know how. Tell them it's their fault that they're blind, and maybe they'll believe it. Say it enough, they'll start to believe it. Appeal to a base part of them. Demonize their political enemies. Tell them what they want to hear. Manipulate them. All these methods will get to them. All those methods can work and can shape the behavior of the sheep. They're all right there. They're for the taking. You'll get their attention. You'll get their clicks. You might even get their money. But what I want you to see is that there's only one gate. It is the gate of loving mercy. It's the gate that's equally open to the blind man and the Pharisee alike. And the only kind of shepherd is the one who understands that, who sees the dignity in all the sheep. That is the way of life abundant. And that's why we're here. I was pondering all this week, And my mind went to one of my favorite passages from 1 Peter. Through Christ, God has led us into an inheritance which is imperishable, undefiled, and unfading, kept in heaven for you. God's love is imperishable, undefiled, and unfading. It is consistent, it is steadfast. The Pharisees' treatment of that blind man was they were divided, it ebbed and flowed. They sort of were running by the seat of their pants, interviewing one person after another. It did not seem imperishable, undefiled, and unfading, did it? I read a sermon this week about 1 Peter, this passage. It was by Fred Craddock. He posed a question to the congregation. Have you ever been present for the official reading of a will? The passage is about this imperishable inheritance. Have you ever been present for the reading of a will? I haven't myself. Maybe you have. Is that still a thing where the family gathers in the lawyer's office and he unseals the envelope and reads it and everyone's on the edge of their seat waiting to see if their name is called? Is that still a thing? That can be tricky business. I've seen in my family, maybe you've seen it in yours, where the terms of an inheritance can break relationships. An inheritance. It's often determined by the whimsy or the feelings of the benefactor in a particular moment. It can be for arbitrary reasons why one person gets everything and the other one doesn't. It can be out of spite. Inheritance. I was listening to a podcast this week. Sometimes I'll listen to Ezra Klein, and he was interviewing a professor of tax law. And the title of the podcast, Our Tax System Should Make You Furious. And they spent a lot of the time in the podcast talking about the years and resources of effort that have gone toward making it so the most wealthy people in our society can pass down their inheritance without having to pay taxes on it. Like all this money that has gone into campaigns to change the name from estate tax to death tax. Maybe you know a little bit about that. The lobbying to create loopholes and things like that. People will do anything to pass down their inheritances and not have to pay taxes on it. You know, I'm reading all that and all the effort that went into it, and I'm thinking to myself, like, I thought that one of the perks of being one of the ultra-wealthy is that you didn't have to worry about stuff like that. But so many people seemed so worried about it. You know, something else about inheritance. In biblical times, there were a number of people who wouldn't even have bothered to show up for the reading of the will because they knew their name wouldn't be called. People who would have no reason to show up. Today, the most common recipient of inheritance is a spouse, but in biblical times, if the man died, the widow was not entitled to anything, except for like really rare and extenuating circumstances. Women never were. There were some people who, because of their lot, because of their status in society, their name never would have been called. The preacher says, I think the saddest group of people that does not show up for the reading of the will are those who, in terms of expecting anything, have eliminated themselves. These are the folk who have disqualified themselves because of their low station in life, or because of something horrible they have done, or because nobody accepts their lifestyle. Some people during their lifetime gradually erase themselves and stand looking at their shoelaces and say, I am nobody, Why should God include me? I'm not anybody. End quote. Do you know that the gate is open for you? There aren't any qualifications for it. You can just come right in. There's a place for you. Maybe you know someone who just doesn't feel holy enough for church, or for whatever reason has convinced themselves that it's not the place for them. Maybe somebody who's carved out an identity that seems like it wouldn't fit in at church. Maybe somebody who's been told directly or indirectly that they need to stay in their place. Do you know the gate's open for them too? At the end of his sermon, the preacher poses as the lawyer, reading the inheritance, the terms of the inheritance, the will to the congregation. First of all, there is no silver or gold here. You have come to the wrong place if that's what you're interested in. This is a church. There's no silver or gold. There is, however, boundless mercy. And when push comes to shove, that is the part of the inheritance that every one of us will want more than anything else. The boundless mercy of God. Not what we deserve, but what love gives. Amen.